Good morning, guys. Can you hear us? Okay, good. I think it might be a small group today. Between spring break and coronavirus, I think things are a little bit different than usual. So we'll go ahead and get started with our usual agenda of introductions. As a reminder, you're muted throughout the echo session, and please use the chat or raise your hand to prompt us when you need to speak. And if you're logged in with another identifier, you can change your name by hovering over the participant video or name box, then click on those three little dots and rename yourself. So I'm Leni Swails. I'm one of the psychologists here at KU Med.
And I'm Alice Zhang. I'm a postdoctoral fellow and also a behavioral analyst.
And I'm Skylar Bellinger. I'm a psychologist here and also just sitting in today.
Great.
I'm the program manager for Telehealth Rocks.
So as a reminder, the information and recommendations provided today are based on what is currently accepted within the profession. Let's go ahead and do introductions between everyone else who's on the call. And then after that, I thought we could spend a little bit of time just checking in because I think a lot of people are having conversations with schools and with kids about coronavirus. So since that's on everyone's minds, let's go ahead and talk about it. So first, I just want to go ahead and go between the different people on the call to do introductions. I've never facilitated the introductions. Would one of you guys mind to help out with that?
So there's Stephanie.
Yeah, it just looks like Stephanie. Do you want to say hello? Hold on one second. I think you're still muted.
Okay,
There
now
we
you
go.
can
Go
talk.
ahead.
Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Stephanie Foney. I'm I work for Leavenworth Schools. I'm a behavior analyst and autism specialist here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is anyone else on the call?
Yes, we have Jennifer Elson.
Morning, guys. Jennifer Elson. I'm the school counselor slash school nurse slash school secretary today at Washington Grade School in Ellis, Kansas. And so just warning, I might have to hop off with all these kids coming in sick. I have to keep taking temperatures.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Thank you for wearing all those hats today.
Yes.
And then it looks like Robert is on as well.
Hi, I'm Robert Stiles. I'm a program manager with Telehealth Rocks here at KU School Medicine 2.
Great, thanks. And then Katie, I think you're last but not least. She needs to be unmuted.
Okay, Kitty.
Oh, there we go. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at KU Medical Center as well.
I think that's everybody that I'm seeing. I did see Polly on there for a while, but
Yeah, but it's not there.
okay.
Okay. So Skylar shared this really nice quote this morning from Mr. Rogers. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. We can talk about our feelings to become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. So I just wanted to check in a little bit about how your organization is kind of managing coronavirus right now. Like, are you guys open? Has there been information about whether your schools are going to be closing? Kind of checking in about how you guys are responding to kids. I know that here things are still open, but we're moving as much as possible to work from home or remote meetings. But patients are still coming in. And so we're kind of stepping up our cleaning and sanitizing game. But I'm curious to hear from you guys in schools too, what's going on right now. Stephanie, do you want to share what things are like in your school in Leavenworth?
Hold on one second.
Okay, you're unmuted.
Okay, sorry. Right now, this is our last day before spring break. There has been a little bit of notice that we might look at distance learning afterwards, but not a lot. We do serve a community where not everybody has Wi-Fi and access to internet, so I think that's part of the issues. How do we, provide instruction? But it hasn't been a big thing here as far as I know, other than just sanitizing everything a lot.
How do you think that the kids are doing? Do you feel like, have you guys been talking with them about it? I know at my son's school, they had like a hand washing lesson from the nurse, and he was very interested in that because there was a black light involved, and like, but I was just curious, like, I don't feel like he's told me that they've actually mentioned like what's going on, which has really been a big thing everywhere you look or turn, every, you know, station you turn on or anything like that. So I was curious if you guys had talked to kids about that.
Well, I don't have a classroom. I work more with the adults, but I do think the adults have been having a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah. And then Jennifer, what about, you said you've been holding lots of, or wearing lots of hats, so maybe you know have the pulse on what's happening on in your school.
Yeah, so we have had the hand washing lesson with the black light. The kids loved it. We've been talking about, we have the hand sanitizer, we have the song that they sing when they're supposed to wash their hands. We've talked about, you know, not touching handrails. We have the Clorox wipes and, you know, wiping down their area. We have the sanitizer for them to have on their iPads and things like that. Our staff has been pretty briefed. Our custodians are working with getting ready to do the spraying of the chemical stuff around. We have talked to the kids in the classrooms about it, just about how there are a lot of people getting sick, and just to make sure we want you to do these things so you don't get sick. We do have a contingency plan in place if it comes down from our health department that we have to close, but we aren't to that point yet.
Great. I guess I feel like definitely the sanitation part is coming through from everywhere. I just want to make sure that we're all checking in with kids about just kind of what they're hearing on the news, and you know, I think a big piece is like assuring them they're safe, and we're going to send out some resources. But really just kind of thinking about what we need to reassure them that they're safe. I think in this case, it's what we know is kids have been pretty safe. So I think talking about, you know, really reassuring them that they're safe, and then also thinking about that a lot of it is about how we can help other people, which I think kids feel really good when they can help others. So, yeah. You know, how can we keep our community safe? And the way we can do that is, you know, stay home and wash our hands. And so I love the idea of like sort of making them a helper, or in this article that we're going to send out from with lots of Daniel Tiger, Mr. Rogers things. It talks about, you know, they're the germ busters. So they're the ones sort of that can kill the germs and get rid of them so that we can keep everyone safe. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of a neat way to look at it, because I think you feel better when you're not helpless, right? When you have something you can do and you can be the one that doesn't spread it and bust the germs and things like that. So that's my only thought.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think here in Kansas City, I think we're talking about it more just because there have been more cases here. I think our kids have been talking about it a little bit more. We've had more cancellations for appointments and things like that. So I think we're all like on alert to kind of see how this plays out, but also really trying to think about what each of us can do, whether that's, you know, fewer in-person meetings, whether that's, you know, staying home, whether that's, you know, wiping things down when you have the time to do it in your workplace and also at your house, and taking kind of that personal responsibility to have some control over the situation. I think the other thing too on the next slide is some more resources to share with parents about how to talk with their own children about coronavirus and disease prevention. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network on that top link, which we'll send out, has some nice resources for parents, and they have a grid where it breaks it down by age and then talks about different ways you might share information with kids based on their age and their understanding. And also talks too with parents about how to make your own family plan for if you do need to stay home for a while. How can we create a plan for our family that helps maintain consistency and routine, but also helps keep everyone in our community safe and healthy? And then NASP also has some great resources. I don't know if you guys have already seen a copy of it, but that's also great resources that talks about how to reassure kids, and is even a little bit more detailed than the NCTSN ones. So you might take a look at those two resources to share with families in your school and with teachers.
And just really thinking that we can't really be assuming that kids aren't hearing things, and not what, you know, that they are hearing things, and they're hearing adults talk, and they're hearing the news. And when we don't talk about it, oftentimes it's a lot scarier than when we do, and we just explain this is what's happening, and we're trying to keep everybody safe. And so the best way to keep everybody safe is to stay home and hang out for a while and, be safe, wash our hands at school and all of that stuff. So I think that, sometimes, as we know, the media can hype things up or we can feel really nervous when we hear this. But if we just talk about it in like a reasonable, down to earth, what does this mean for me way, then it's a lot more manageable and less overwhelming for kids.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have thoughts. We often, some of the patients, for example, that had cancel our appointments yesterday are some of the families that I'm most worried about because they've got kids who have really significant behavioral difficulties or acting out problems. And I know for those families, those things get even worse when routines are changed and things are off schedule. We're also trying to think about how can we support families if they do have to stay at home, which in some cases can make existing behavioral problems more difficult. So we were talking about making some visual supports, kind of tying back to some of the things we were talking about at our last ECHO meeting. And if we, the visual supports we make, I was going to put and make available on we have a Facebook page that we use for some of our training opportunities. So if you guys want to check out Kansas Lend, L-E-N-D, on Facebook, any resources that we make, we'll go ahead and share on there. And we would also love to hear from you guys. If there's any resources that you're sharing out with your families, feel free to keep us in the loop too. That way we can all be working on things together and maximize our efforts. Thanks, Alice, for sharing the name of Kansas Lend. So our original topic for today was to talk more about prevention of behavioral problems by talking about relationship building. And so our objectives for the didactic portion was to kind of understand how relationship building can prevent behavioral concerns and then understand specific strategies we can use for relationship building between adults and children. And so we're going to talk about that as time allows in a little bit. But also, Stephanie had a case that she wanted to talk about, and I'd love to hear some more from Stephanie about the kid that she's been working with in her school, and then we can ask some follow-up questions and hopefully come up with some ideas on how to help that student.
And Stephanie did just message in and say that Teachers Pay Teachers has some really good visual supports and things like that people could access if needed. Thanks for that suggestion.
So if we want, can Stephanie, is she unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Stephanie, if you want to tell us a little bit about the student that you were going to do your case presentation on, we'd love to hear about them. I don't know if this is as relevant to your school setting, but I think one thing I often like to share with parents is the CDC has some fantastic handouts about ADHD and what our current research shows is the most effective treatment for it. Mm-hmm. I like it because it's a really balanced perspective, and they show that it's a combination. I always tell families it's like that three-pronged approach to treatment, right? School-based intervention, and we're doing the best we can here, as well as behavioral therapy, which I know you guys have tried in the past, and then the third piece is medication. Mm-hmm. So the handouts, I think, are really kind of nice and neutral. I'm happy to send you a link to that as well. I also, I'm more of on the medical side in a medical setting, and I know there's different kinds of approaches that you would use in school to make sure that you're not dictating medical decisions. But that could be something to open the door, or at least to provide some, evidence-based research about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and even the kind of
thing we can say, this is the data, this is what he looks like when he's not on meds, and this is what he looked like when he was. But it's a parent decision ultimately.
Absolutely.
With the doctor. So that's kind of where we're stuck.
I was just thinking about the study that shows that it's best to start with behavioral therapy and then add medication in later. And so that could be a way you could almost reinforce or praise the family for what they've already done. It's like, we're doing all this at school, and you guys have done we've done a great job of trying these behavioral things, and and so we just want to make sure we're giving him the most comprehensive treatment, so that again, that not like a blaming, but what else can we add in that's going to make him even more successful. Mm-hmm. And here's what we know, right?
Yeah, Jennifer had a good question about just what is their concerns with the medication.
Well, it's been hard to kind of tease out. I think they have some preconceptions about the idea of having a child on medication for behavior, maybe. That I'm not quite, they just don't think he should need it. They think because it's a behavior problem, that he should just be able to control it.
Yeah, that's really tricky.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it's a good question to.
Diabetes, you would give him insulin, right? Because that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So if they were here in a medical setting, the way that I would handle that situation is starting by doing just what Jennifer said, which is just asking in a really open-ended way, tell me more about what some of your concerns are with medication. So that way it's not necessarily putting them on the defensive, but it's just we're all here to learn about what each other is thinking about it. And it's kind of a non-judgmental approach. And then saying, let's say they say that they don't want him to be a zombie. You say, oh, well, absolutely. The last thing we would ever want is for him to be a zombie. And sometimes parents have preconceived notions based on what medications were like when they were in school. But we've gotten a lot better with our medication now. And if there was ever a medication that made him act like a zombie, that would mean that it's absolutely the wrong medication for him. That would not be an acceptable side effect.
Right.
Just like Dr. Bellinger was talking about too, I also like to tell parents that there's research that shows, even though we know the best approach is that combination of school-based interventions plus behavioral therapy plus medication, you can't start them all in the same day. So they've done research to see, well, if you start this one first versus this one, what does that do for your outcomes? And we found that if you start with the behavioral therapy first, kids ultimately need lower doses of medication in the long run, and their behavior therapy is more effective for treating some of those symptoms. And then you can say, that means that you guys are doing it absolutely right by starting with the behavioral therapy first. And we've made some great progress in that area. So that way, when you're ready to start that, or if you want to, hopefully he'll need lower doses of medicine than he would have initially. And then I think the other thing that can also be helpful is talking about some of the brain science behind ADHD too. So we've recently redefined ADHD as a neurodevelopmental disability. As opposed to just a behavioral disorder.
Right.
And that's because we have lots and lots of research showing that there's differences in brain development and in brain connections in kids who have ADHD. Specifically, it's this front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that's in control of impulse control, organizing, and planning, that's underactive in kids who have ADHD. So the goal of our stimulant medication is to wake up the planning and organizing of the brakes part of your brain so they can stop and think before they act. And so right now, his brakes are underactive. His brakes are slow and sluggish. And so stimulant medication will help wake up his brakes so that he can stop and think before he does an action.
And I think just pointing out too, you mentioned that they said he shouldn't need it. He should just be able to control it. I think that kind of just continuing to support the fact that it shouldn't be this hard for him. Like why are we wanting to make it harder than it is if his brain is kind of working differently? He could be trying really hard, and you could point that out. Like he's working so hard. We can tell like there's all these things that he's trying, and we're working so hard, and everybody's working so hard, but it shouldn't be this hard. And the reason it's so hard is because of this brain difference. And can we make it so everybody can be more successful? And so I think that, but it is really, I know it's tricky when you guys are in the schools. I know it's like a tricky conversation to have for sure.
Yeah, and I see your question, Jennifer, about like natural mind enhancers. And that's a great question that I think a lot of people want to know the answer to is like, what are the impacts of dietary changes or different vitamins or things that you might see at natural food stores that might be able to help enhance attention and concentration. Right now, our science doesn't have any research that supports that. And the ones that has the most support is stimulant medication, behavioral therapy, and school-based interventions. As long as there's no harm to a family, they could certainly try those things with the support of their physician or doctor. But I always tell families, I would rather we try the thing that we think is the best chance of helping, which is stimulant medications, behavior therapy, and school-based interventions.
And it sounds like, Stephanie, that really wasn't their concern, right? That they weren't necessarily worried about the like natural versus unnatural. You're just not sure.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, it didn't sound like that were the parents concerned about like using a natural medication versus a chemical medication, or you just haven't heard that piece yet?
No, they haven't. We haven't discussed that because I'm not familiar enough with what the natural quote unquote medications, and because I was not aware of any evidence supporting that. So I think that maybe having more discussions about it being a brain-based kind of thing rather than a behavioral choice, which is kind of where they're stuck right now, would be more effective with them perhaps.
Yeah.
Helping them see it as a health problem, not a behavior problem.
Yeah, and luckily a health problem that we have some ideas on how to support.
And you can even find brain scans that show, you know, the different parts that are underactive in an ADHD brain versus an, you know, non-ADHD brain. And I think that can be really powerful because, again, that's not really, he's not choosing that. That's just the way that their brain is functioning.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Stephanie, for sharing that case with us and having that discussion. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions? Okay, great. Well, we'll send out a summary of some of those ideas, and I'll also send out those CDC handouts about ADHD treatment, okay? So let's go on for the last little bit of time that we have left to talk about relationship building. And we probably won't have time to go through all of these slides, but this is some materials from a workshop that we provide that's like 3 or 4 hours long. That's all about what can you do in a really concrete way to quickly build relationships between kids and adults, with the idea that building that relationship, just like Jennifer was talking about, is a way to prevent behavior problems from happening in the first place. So one analogy that people often use is think about your best coach or your best boss, and what was that person like? So for me, like, the best boss that I've had is someone who often like notices when I'm doing things right, comes by and just makes chit chat with me and asks me about my weekend and builds a relationship with me. What about, do you guys have thoughts about kind of the best coach you've had or best boss and what that looks like?
I agree with all what you already shared, and also I think sometimes I like how when they give me really good expectation that is clear and I know what I'm doing right and what I need feedback on.
Yeah.
So that feedback is really important for me.
And I think just being like listening to your point of view or perspective, like on something, instead of just like putting it down, but like, here's how it is, like listening to kind of why you did something the way you did, or being open to that.
Communication.
Yeah.
I think communication. I think that for me, some of the best bosses I've had, and I don't say coach because I am not a sports person, guys. People who know me know that. So for me, also my best boss is not someone who I only see when they have something they want to tell me to do or give me feedback on a project, but someone who's checking in with me regularly and I feel like I have a relationship with, so that I can also go to them when I have problems with things.
I totally agree. Just like when you ask how my families are in China. That's important.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next slide. So that kind of comes to the idea of building relationships before you make demands. So a lot of times in schools, we'll talk about this 5-to-1 ratio of, for every demand that you put on a kid, every time you tell them to please start your work, please have a seat in your chair, please use your quiet voice, whatever, you need to have at least 5 positive interactions to offset that. And I like to think about the analogy of how many coins are in your relationship bank. So before you have an expectation or make a demand on a kid, you need to make sure you have enough coins in your relationship bank to make that withdrawal. So if you think about each positive thing you say to a kid, so, oh, hey, good morning, hope you had a good day at school, I hope you had a good evening at school, or that's a nice backpack, or just, oh yeah, it sounds like you guys played a fun game at home, or whatever, anything that's kind of neutral or positive, each one of those is worth $1, but then when you tell them to go sit down to do their math, that costs 5. So making sure that you have enough of those positive interactions to offset the demands. And we know that kids experience their world as an environment of relationships, and those relationships affect all aspects of their development. So thinking about those relationships as a way of preventing challenging behaviors from later happening. I'm gonna do some of these.
Sure. So here we're going to talk about like the importance of play. So play sounds really, really easy, but it's really important as well. The interaction we have with children, not just during the play setting when we have like some toys or some books or any kind of equipment, but also when we see them when they first coming in, all those communication that can really be helpful to help building the relationship and also facilitate the language development, communication skills, and just really help the kid learning all the social skills. So, so here we talk about it more like in a play setting, but I just want to emphasize all the skills we're going to talk about here really can generalize to other settings as well outside of play settings. So when we do want to have some kind of play with our child to building that relationship, or just have a one-on-one conversation before the class to build that really positive relationship, there are several things that we want to keep in mind that we want to avoid. The first thing that we want to avoid is to avoid the quash the lead to lead. So we want to create unnecessary questions and quiet the criticisms. So this is our 3 cues. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the quash the lead to lead. So a lot of times we tend to give directions with, and we don't even realize that we are giving directions, but giving directives can like really take the lead away from the child and becoming you are dominating the conversation or the play. And also sometimes there are some hidden commands that we don't realize they are really commands, like, you know, instead of, sometimes we say, you can easily tell, like, you know, pick up that trash or throw that trash in the trash can. We can easily tell that's a direction, but there are things that we, no matter how you know, how polite it sounds, like, can you please throw that trash away, or can you please pick that up? That's still a command, but it's just like really sound nice. And when you throw in a lot of commands, either directive commands or hidden commands in the play, or when you're trying to have a fun conversation with your 6th grade boy who really wants your attention, that directive, you know, directions can really take the fun out of the conversation or the play. I think, oh, I'm not phrasing.
You're not.
Okay.
She did.
Oh, yeah. So then the other thing is when you're trying to just quickly build a relationship with a kiddo, try to avoid unnecessary questions. So a lot of times we'll ask questions of kids like, you know, oh, I'm thinking about a kid I saw in the waiting room the other day. Oh, is that a mermaid backpack? Is a mermaid your favorite animal? What color is your backpack? And that was me unnecessarily grilling this kid on things that I probably could have guessed myself. And it really took the lead over the conversation. Maybe she wanted to tell me about something else. It can also make it seem like you aren't listening to the kid, as well as can sometimes sound like you might disagree or are being critical. And additionally, for younger kids or kids with language delays, it's a lot harder for them to come up with the words to answer your questions. So being mindful about asking those questions very selectively and quitting those unnecessary questions. And then the last cue is kind of quieting those criticisms. So a criticism is anytime we point out a negative behavior. So it's anything that involves your no, don't, stop, or quits. As we know, we've been talking a lot about attention. And so the more that you say quit, you know, throwing paper at the other student, that's giving attention to that negative behavior and pointing it out, as opposed to stating that more positively, like, please keep your hands to yourself. You know, those criticisms can also create friction if you say things like, no, you don't need to use a pen for this, please use a pencil. That can create an unnecessary amount of friction when maybe that doesn't necessarily matter. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things to avoid if you're trying to quickly build a relationship with a child. The P's are the things to do. So we've taken away your ability to give directions, to ask questions, or to point out negative behaviors, but instead we want you to replace that with the P's, which stand for praise, specific praise, paraphrase, and point out.
Mm-hmm. So for praise, there are the difference between the specific praise versus a vague praise. So the specific praise tells really the child exactly what you like about what he did, what he or she did. So for example, when you are having a conversation with the child, like Dr. Bellinger mentioned earlier, like really pointing out, I like how you are focusing on doing your task, or I like how you are really using your inside voice. All those things that you really want to shape the child to behave more like that, then you want to really pointing out and use the label praise for that, use specific praise for that. So specific praise can really increase good behavior, and it's really a powerful motivator for changes for that child to make. And also, it really makes you and the child feels good. So when you praise someone, or when you get praises for someone else, it really is a reinforcer. So talking about the specific praise, we want to try to avoid weak praise. So weak praise is like, good job. I'm saying, good job, Stephanie, you're the best, and awesome, wonderful. And you're probably wondering, why are you suddenly like praising me? But if I say, hey, Stephanie, you did such a wonderful job presenting, and thank you for paying attention when we are speaking, that would be so much different. Because when it's so vague, it doesn't really tell you what exactly you did really good, and it won't really increase the chance that you will do more like that behavior in the future.
So thinking about praising at school, I've been praising kids all over the place for covering their coughs lately. Specifically, good job coughing right in your elbow. That was awesome, covering your cough. Thanks for telling me, good using words, nice gentle hands. Thinking about older kids, thanks for raising your hand before you ask a question. Good job concentrating on your math for your distractible ADHD kid. Thanks for sharing, and I like your inside voice. Paraphrase is the idea of using those active listening skills. So when someone says something to you, you paraphrase it and you parrot it back. It lets the child lead the conversation. So that kid who's coming in and you're trying to quickly give them that dose of attention, paraphrasing back what they're telling you about their day lets them know you're really listening. It shows some level of acceptance for what they're talking about. And it can also really help with speech and language development too. For younger kids, we know the more that we paraphrase and repeat back, the more often they'll talk. And for older kids, we can also reflect back emotions too to help with emotional development. So some examples, we've got younger kid examples on the top, but for the bottom, we've got things like, I hear what you're saying, that work is really hard. They didn't share with you, that sounds really frustrating. I know that other kid is being really loud. I bet that's frustrating for you. Things like that where you can reflect back those emotions as well.
Yeah, sometimes I hear parents or sometimes adults saying it's kind of weird to repeat back what the child has said. And what would you say in that sense?
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is it can sound really weird when people are reflecting back exactly what you say. So I literally just paraphrase what they told me.
Yeah.
And then point that out, because we all do that even as an adults. It's a strategy that most teachers use. It's a strategy all therapists use for adults and for kids. We all like to feel heard. You don't have to parrot back word for word what someone says, but paraphrasing the content helps someone feel like you were listening to them.
Exactly. And you can add like reflecting their emotions. And another thing that we want to, the third P is pointing out. So pointing out really is just describing what the child is doing. So it allows the child to lead, so that when you are describing the child, you will have to really concentrate and paying attention to what the child is doing for you to be able to describe what the child is doing. And shows that you are really engaged in the child's activities. So you can say, I see how you are really working hard on your math sheet. You are like sitting so nice, you are sitting quietly, or you are working on your project, you are putting things together. All those things that you can, depending on whether you are in a play setting or you are just like trying to have a conversation with the child or youth. Also, you can teach concepts and ideas to the child. So while you are describing, you can introduce something, maybe it's language or math concept that the child has not learned. You can actually use that language so that the child knows that's what they are doing. And you can also increase the child's attention to the task and help the children organize their thoughts about the task. That's something that is really helpful for children with ADHD when they are really so busy and being so distracted. When you describe their behavior, it's really helpful when helping them concentrate on what they are doing. Also, again, you are modeling that really appropriate speech and teaching them new language.
So here's some examples of ways that you can be pointing out and just sort of describing what a child's doing in the classroom. So you're looking at the book, you're sitting on the carpet, I see you're turning the pages, I see Ben sat in his seat and got right to work, you're working on the first set of problems. So you're just pointing out and just sort of narrating what they're doing in order to draw their attention and help them focus on that behavior you want to see more of. So like I said, elements of this are pulled from a much larger training and presentation and workshop we do called CARE, or Child-Adult Relationship Enhancement. As part of that workshop, we talk in a lot more detail about each of those strategies and do practices and role plays and help everyone figure out which of those is their strength and how to do more of the other ones they might need more practice with. And that workshop is pulled from a much larger treatment program called PCIT, Parent-Child Interaction Therapy, that has a lot of research to support it as one of the most evidence-based interventions for children with significant disruptive behavior, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, etc. And that's a program that we're all really passionate about because we're all PCIT therapists. And that's one also that Dr. Bellinger provides over telemedicine for those in the Telehealth Rocks Schools grant area. Jennifer, you're having a day.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right, I think we're ready. Is there anything else you guys want to say about that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's about all that we had for today. Please tune in 2 weeks from now for the March 13th Echo.
The 27th?
March 27th.
Today's the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. And do you remember what the topic is for our next session?
I don't have it.
Sorry about
That's okay. Well, we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. We'll send out some of these slides with the updated resources as well as the CDC handouts about ADHD. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.